Do people care that video piracy makes studios lose money? Well, there's a new survey that's going to tell us just that. It's from the digital security company Irdetto. And what's interesting is a surprising majority of the people are actually good-hearted, according to this study. So per the survey, only 39% of American consumers said they were unaffected by the knowledge that studios lose money because of their bootleg activities. That's still a substantial amount. That's still almost 40% of people that participate in the study that do not care, even though that they have this knowledge. And of the study, just so you know, there was 1,190 people in the U.S. that they surveyed. They were all over the age of 18 years old. And then also it says here that 74% of the U.S. consumers acknowledge that producing or sharing pirated video content is illegal in their eyes, while 69% agreed that streaming or downloading pirated content is also illegal. So interesting. And then it brought up too that not only does it hurt the bottom dollar of the studios, but it's not as bad with streaming services. They found that there's less pirated material since there's streaming services. Thoughts, 5 words or less?
Ahoy, mateys! Oh, different pirates.
I'm with the 39%.
You're a pirate!
You're a little pirate! Yar!
Yeah. So tell us, okay, good, because I guess I've never really injected myself in this conversation because I've never been presented the opportunity. I've just never pirated anything. It's never been like, I've never looked at my moral obligation or my moral compass in that because I've never really been presented with pirated material. Is that weird?
Oh my God. I mean, I grew up in Turkey, so it's different. There's a massive black market for movies. And by the way, that black market in an international scale exists largely because of distribution rights. And we don't have access to certain movies in time, or when I was growing up, that was the case. Now it's a little different. But that was a big part of the reason. Extremely high taxes from the government, where like a video game in America will cost $60, but in Turkey would be like $120 or whatever the equivalent is. So a lot of people would just go and like I pirated almost everything when I was growing up. Literally, there were entire stores, like storefronts, brick and mortar stores that sold exclusively pirated games. And
so let's pretend you're part of the study. You know that it hurts the studio's bottom dollar, and it could
don't
affect.
Give a shit at all.
And it could affect them
Absolutely
producing additional content. You don't care. You're going to still pirate.
I don't believe it. The profit margins are way too wide for a studio to be like, oh, I can't justify this. I'm sorry. Like we can't. No. First of all, they could realign their marketing budgets if the profit margins were razor thin, which they're not. So, no, I don't think that it affects new development at all. As a matter of fact, there are certain instances where I don't want to pirate. There are certain instances where I do want to watch the show. If it's available, especially, I'll never pirate, obviously, if it's available on any streaming service, and that's a different situation. But like a movie like Avengers, like, I don't give a shit. I don't want them to make any more Avengers anyway. But like if it's a smaller movie,
like an independent film,
or something that a big studio has kind of taken a chance on, and those movies you probably shouldn't pirate because then you want the movie to make as much money as possible so that the studio will take risks. And unfortunately, most studios don't want to take risks. That's what actually curbs new development, not pirating.
I love your stipulations within your pirating. That's great. What about you, Grace?
I haven't really pirated myself, but kind of in a similar way. My brother he went on like a trip to Romania, or like when he'd go on trips, because my parents would never like fund this, he'd come back with a bunch of sort of bootleg DVDs of movies that were not released in Belgium, or that maybe they were released but maybe not in English or something like that. And so I've seen pirated DVDs before and like pirated movies.
Do they look the same, or is there someone like filming it?
It's probably my brother just getting swindled, but it was usually ones of like, he would buy the ones of them being in like a theater and really
That's
bad
awful.
quality,
those are awful.
Really bad
There's
quality.
a way, like there's I was a specialist when it comes to
I really need to see the Aviator again.
Finding pirated DVDs. Like, that there are different layers to it. Like, for example, if it's usually the most common and the best version you can find is for your consideration screener ones, which leak and then or like some critic will just sell it off to a website, which then opens it up to the private marketplace.
I agree with you, especially in the sense that like I understand why people don't give a shit, especially when you go to a movie. It's like $15. It's insane. And in this economy, it's really hard to say, let's go see a movie. If you have a family, just myself and my husband, then if you have a family of 4 or 6, that's a really big expense. But I will say, too, you have to look at if 40% of people don't care, and you said it's as prevalent as it is where you were and where you were, I can imagine that it does hurt their bottom dollar. And for the smaller studios, and maybe even the bigger studios, not everyone in the movie industry makes money. Just a very few tier, like the top percent makes money. All the people and the production crews, the production assistants, the people working on it, the people that are marketing it, make average salaries.
Do you think
so,
the distribution is going to change though if the movies made more money? Of course not.
This is what I would say.
Because revenues have gone up.
I think you need to. I don't know. It's just a question to ponder because I don't want to. If I was given a bunch of pirated material, like I said,
well, that's why
I get
there's
it.
unions.
Yeah, I
that
get
protect
it.
Those people.
Okay,
right, but then maybe they're not making their point was that they're not making as much content because it's hurting their bottom dollar, and if they're not making as much content, that's going to affect other people's jobs that depend on those jobs. I don't know. This is me just playing the devil's advocate.
Here's why.
I don't know.
It's honestly bullshit because one, like I said, they make enough money as is, which is a stupid argument because we live in a capitalist society and you always want to increase your bottom dollar. However, what I mean by that is they can readjust. That's one. And two, it doesn't, they don't take risks anyway. That we're not taking enough risks with new content argument isn't because of piracy reasons. Because like I said, they're not doing it because they go for the big money makers anyway. And they now focus more on the international market because of the Chinese market and the prevalence and how important it is to that's like an additional billion people that could possibly see your movie. So it's not
studios,
about.
I think you were right earlier to mention that the smaller films that are pirated. I'm sure it hurts them.
But what I was going to say about that is, shit, I had a really good point.
I have a point.
Can I get in?
Okay, good.
Get in.
So as someone who's worked for a film studio before, and one of the biggest film studios in Europe, and like an up and coming one in the US, I don't advocate for pirating. However, I don't sympathize for the studios because when you're talking about the bottom dollar doesn't help, that money, they make it seem like, the people, they're not, that you're hurting the employees at the company. No, they don't give it, they really, at least the company that I worked for, they didn't give a shit about the assistants, and it wasn't it was only going to pad the higher level employees. It doesn't do anything to take away from or help or benefit.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect, piracy doesn't affect the lower people that much at all. If anything, we're the first ones to get cut, and then, or we would have been the first people to get cut, and we're the ones that get cut so that they can make sure that the CEOs and all the higher level people don't lose their money at all, even though they're already making exorbitant money for churning out really shitty movies.
Yeah.
So I don't think that piracy is good, but if your argument is that it hurts the lower level employees at the company and the people that are making sure that all the executives have their lunch every day and the people doing the groundwork, no, it doesn't. Then they don't care about us to begin with, and so a thing like piracy is just sort of like a false flag that they show up being no, don't you, it's really harmful, not the executives, it's the employees that you should care about.
And
it's well, you don't even care about the employees, so how do you expect other people that don't even work at the company to care about the employees?
And you can point, like I said, the distribution of revenue and how it is, how different it is, the disparity between what a CEO or an executive makes versus what someone in the bottom of the barrel, like a PA, makes is so tremendous, and of course that's going to happen.
No,
that's understandable. But then you look at revenues growing significantly over the years versus the rate of distribution hasn't changed either. So that's the point I was trying to make. The second point I just remembered is I disagree. And you hear about TV execs, especially like Game of Thrones, for example, mentioning that they are the most pirated show on the planet. And they actually, they don't come out and say we support it, but they don't mind it. And they don't mind it because these movies also generate a tremendous amount of revenue from merchandising. Mm-hmm. So essentially, someone that doesn't have access to HBO or someone that doesn't want to purchase HBO or doesn't have enough money to buy the box set for Game of Thrones can now watch Game of Thrones, be a part of the public debate on Game of Thrones, increase Game of Thrones' social footprint. That's another layer of marketing that Game of Thrones is getting for free. So luckily, so that's the reason why these studios don't really combat it as much as they possibly could. If they wanted to, they could shut this entire shit down. Right. But they don't because it increases the amount of money that they can potentially make
if they're savvy with it. That's an interesting
point. It puts it in front of people that would not normally see it.
I get it. I totally get it and understand it. So yeah, please share your thoughts in the comment section below. We'll see you next time on Pop Trigger.